Wait, why are you here? Jolene says as she backs up from her front door, looking out at the man she once knew to be her best friend's brother. He was tall and had tan skin with pitch black curled hair. He stepped towards her with long strides to make it apparent why he had come. Jolene was almost a foot shorter than him with blonde long hair. He grabbed her and pulled her out of the house and into a black sedan. Once inside of the big SUV, he slapped Jolene, saying, "Just do what I say, and you will be able to go home." She sat in the back seat quiet the whole drive, until they showed up at an unusual house in a different town than she lived. When he put the car in park, Jolene spoke up and said, "Nathan, why are we here and what are you going to do with me?" He turned around to face her and said in a hushed voice, "I said just do what I say, and you will be able to go home." He got out of the front seat and opened the back driver's side door, and said, "Get out now." Jolene jumped out of the car, and then Nathan didn't waste any time tying her hands behind her back. He pushed her in front of him, and grabbed onto her wrists as he walked her into the dark house. When they got to the door, he knocked 3 times and whistled once. He whispered to Jolene in a growl, "Don't say a word, okay?" She just shook her head to show that she understood what she had to do. A giant man came to the door and opened it. He was Mexican and had defined muscles that you could see from underneath the shirt he was wearing. They walked in together, and Nathan shoved her down on the couch in the living room that was to the left of them right as they walked in. He said, "Sit here and do not go anywhere with anyone." Jolene sat down in the quiet of the house, while Nathan followed the big guy into the back room of the house. She couldn't hear that they were saying, but she knew they were talking. Jolene heard a vehicle pull into the driveway of the house, and she thought to herself, "Oh wow, another person, great." There were steps getting louder as they came to the door. Once they walked in, she automatically knew the face that walked into the living room. It was Nathan's older brother Josh. Jolene only had seen him a handful of times, but she could never forget his face, because of the distinct scar across his right cheek. When he walked in, he put his hand over her mouth, and got her out of the sketchy house. When they were in the safety of his small blue car, he cut the rope that binds Jolene's hands together. They started to drive away from the house, and Jolene asked, "Where are we going?" Josh just kept looking at the road and said, "We're going somewhere where those psychos can't get to you." "What's going on?" Jolene questioned the man in the drive seat. Josh just simply said they were going to sell you to the highest bidder at an auction. "Wait, why would they do that?" stated Jolene. Josh just said for the money. At this point, all Jolene is thinking is, when will I get to go home? Where the hell is my best friend in all this? Where am I going? They drove for a very long time until they reached a very expensive fancy hotel. When they walked into the lobby, there were chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and nice furniture everywhere. It was kind of weird how Josh already had a room, but I guess not, because he knew about the other men's plans. When they walked into the room, Josh said, "I'm sorry, but I could only get one room, but I'll sleep on the couch, and you can have the bed." Without hesitation, Jolene plopped down on the comfortable bed, but then felt bad and said, "Well, you can sleep up here too." Josh just said, "Only if you're okay with it." Jolene just nodded her head, and Josh climbed into the bed. They scooted closer and closer to each other, then they were cuddling. After a while of getting comfortable, they drifted off to sleep. When she woke up, Josh was getting room service for breakfast. Jolene got up to see what was going on at the door, and Josh spoke up and said, "What would you like to eat for breakfast?" Jolene replied with just pancakes and orange juice. They sat down and ate quietly. After their meal, Josh said, "You can get ready for the day. I bought you clothes, and the shower is past the kitchen." She stood up and walked into the bathroom. There was a gigantic bathtub and a walk-in shower. She decided to take a quick shower when she got out. She wrapped a towel around her and looked for the clothes he was talking about. They were sitting on the counter nicely folded, but there was something weird about them. It was only a small black dress, and when she put it on, it only went down to her upper thigh, and her breasts almost jumped out of the piece of clothing. She opened up the bathroom door a little, and she could hear that she was on the phone with someone, but still called out to Josh, saying, "Josh, the clothes don't quite fit right." Josh came from the living room to the outside of the bathroom door and said, "Well, just let me see. It's probably not that bad." Jolene just walked out, pulling at the bottom of the dress to make sure it did not ride up and shower her pink underwear. Josh just said, "It looks fine, and plus we're going to a gala today." This is when it dawned on Jolene that Josh is the one trying to sell me, not Nathan. When she made this realization, she ran out of the room and Josh followed her. She got to the lobby of the hotel and didn't know what her next move was going to be, but then Nathan appeared out of nowhere. He grabbed her hand and started to run outside and said, "Didn't I tell you to so as I said, and you would be able to go home?" Jolin didn't say anything but followed him to his black sedan. Once they were in the SUV, they were quiet the whole way until they showed up to a familiar house she had seen before. It was Nathan's house. They got out and went inside. Once Jolin got inside and the door shut, she dropped to her knees and started to cry really hard with streams of tears coming out of her eyes. Nathan walked and knelt in front of her and held her and said, "You're okay now, all right? Don't worry about anything. I'm going to take care of you." She just looked up at him and smiled through her tears and said, "I should have just listened to you." He replied quickly, "It's okay. All I care about is that you're safe." Then he held onto her tighter. He kissed the top of her head and said, "I have always loved you, and always will." She looked up at Nathan and kissed him without thought. Jolin said after a while, "What do we do now?"